Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another session on Python programming. Yesterday, I had given you a small assignment, and that was about writing a menu-driven program. Looks like Harsh and Ashish has made an attempt to solve that particular assignment. It was expected that each one of you solve that particular assignment.
Sir, you are not audible.
So assignment, it was expected that all of you solve. I see Rahul also has solved this particular assignment. So let's look at the way the implementation has been done. So let's open up the first one that Harsh has submitted today. And first we'll talk about it before we start with the next topic for today's discussion. Today's discussion is going to revolve around a concept called as nested functions. So before we do that, let's explore this assignment that you have solved. It's a menu-driven program that I had asked you to implement. So let's see what this was, the one that Harsh has submitted. He says import sys, he writes a function called as accept data. Then he writes a function called as multiply, addition, subtraction, division, power, and a global variable. Now, this is not what is expect. Now, when you design some functions, you should write a main block over here. If name equal to main, and then you should be doing certain other rest of the things. It cannot be the case that you write it in such fashion. If you write the code, now tell me where does this while loop belong to? To which function does it belong to? So that was not the best choice. You should have started with if name equal to main, and probably inside it which you would have gone ahead creating. Plus this additional global variable is something which is not expected. But I don't know where you are using this global variable. Data entered is equal to false. Where have you used this variable? Here, data entered is equal to true. But where are you making use of that particular data? Are you making use of that data anywhere? Yes, हर्ष कहीं इसका इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं आप? If data
नहीं
is
सर,
entered,
फॉल्स और ट्रू के लिए अगर
accept
कुछ
data. If
चेंज
data has
नहीं
been
एंटर
entered,
नहीं किया तो
okay. So you could have always taken it if variables num1 and num2 are none. Okay. And once if I enter the data and choice greater than equal to and okay, that means if this function was called first, but that could have been handled in a different way. But you are taking a if a menu choice equal to 2 है तो multiply करो 3 है तो ये करो 4 है तो ये करो 5 है तो ये करो. Okay. But then where is the main block? So that is missing. Let's see what Ashish has done. Ashish writes a main block and he creates a menu inside main block. You could write a function to create a menu. We have to decompose the code to an extent that is possible. Here you are making a choices. This for this purpose also you could write a function, but definitely to display a menu you could very well write a function. Accept, multiply, addition, and so on. And when you give a call to accept data, where is this function accept data? It's missing. So if I enter choice as 1, then you are actually performing the operation. Now, if I have to perform an operation of accepting integers, I could very well write a function to do that particular operation, wherein the validation, everything could have been done in the function, like what he is trying to do. You could accept integer, check with the validation, and then you could have returned the value and so on. But then, Harsh, this much was good enough. You could have just returned the variable. There was no need for you to do this. You could have just called this function 2 times. First to accept the first number, next to accept the second number, and so on.
okay,
You should write a function which performs more than one operation. This is also accepting integer and this is also accepting integer. Why do you need to write both the code in the same thing? Look at this. Except for the variable num1, rest all code over here and code over here is exactly the same. That's
yes.
duplication of it. So such kind of duplication should never be in the program. So let's see the last what Rahul had submitted. Okay, this is what Rahul has submitted. He has add, multiply, divide, power. He too doesn't write a main function for displaying the menu. Okay. And then he says choice equal to 5, then exiting the program. But what if choice is not 5? This is operations of choice of num1, num2. The operation is a set in which, oh, it's not a set, it's a dictionary.
Dictionary, sir.
It's a dictionary. The operation of choice, that means 1, 2, 3, 4, that will give you add, multiply, divide, power. And he's calling that particular function to get that particular work done. That's a very innovative way to do that. So let's complete this code because this is one which is very near to the expected design. So he creates a dictionary and these are the keys inside the dictionary, the choices that we have. So this is coming very close to the solution. So I'll take this solution and we'll work on this particular solution. And
Even I
we'll
shared
try
it.
and complete it. Okay. Let's do it. Let's copy his code and try and complete that design. Let's save this particular file. I call it as menu. And what more we could have done is we could have had a function saying print menu. And you don't have to pass anything to this function. So this function returns none. And this menu operations that you have, you could just print it over there. That's it. So we could have a function called as print menu that will do the operation for you. Addition, multiplication, division, power. But we should also have a function to accept the data. Because you're going to perform addition, accepting the data. So choice in operation में add है, multiply है. So every time you are accepting these two values, so to accept the two values, we should have accept integer or something like that, some function. With a bit of validation that Harsh has done, I have copied over here. It says enter the first number. Now there is a question. Now accept integer, but how do you know it's a first integer or second integer, everything? So in that case, I could just use a variable over here as message. And if you wanted to send some message which prompts the user what is to enter, you could very well send this message over here. And that message would get printed. So here, when I had to accept the data, probably it was num1, whatever it is, num1 is equal to, I could just say accept integer. And whatever message I would like to pass, integer. So what is the message? Likewise, I could accept the second integer as well. And And he says if the input is wrong, he's going to terminate the program. That's okay. If everything is okay, we're gonna here I could raise an exception. But he says exit. For a moment, I'll let him use exit. But I could raise and inform to the user that this is not what is expected to enter. But if it is digit, he converts it into a number, integer, and it returns an integer. So that's a simplistic version of that function. I can call this function 2 times with whatever message I would like to have. Then he says if choice is equal to 5. So operations may you could give that particular choice as well. So 4 and 5. So the operation over here is exit, or I'll say quit. So that's again a predefined function in Python. Quit. That is already defined built-in function. So I'll say stop. Okay. I just say that's all. At the end, whatever it is. And it will do nothing. And here I'll have to do something. Let's see. So he says if choice is 5, instead of saying this, I'm going to say call function stop. And then I say break. If choice in operation, obviously this is also in operation. So I don't have to do that. Okay. For choice in operation, if choice is amongst 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 है तो break करके you come out of the loop. And if choice in operation, we are accepting the first integer and the second integer. So we will be accepting this over here then. We'll accept it over here. And then we'll perform operation. Operation is a dictionary. Choice will give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever is the choice that you have entered. So this I could, anyway, I'm going to say break, it will stop the program. And if choice is 1, suppose, so operations of choice will give you this function name called as add, because add is a function that we have now, which we have added to the dictionary. And it will now call indirectly the function add and pass the 2 values, and then it'll print the result. What is the result? So we could also get the name of the function if you wanted to get the name of the function like add or addition, whatever it is. Okay, I have done some interesting stuff which I'll show you later, immediately after this. But if I wanted to print the result, a result of, I want to know that addition, if it's an addition result. So that's possible actually. How is it possible? Let's do it. I guess a result of operations of choice under name Dunder. If I have any function, suppose if I have this function is called a stop. And if I say stop dot dunder name dunder, it tells me stop. So I can say result of add. Okay. I want to say addition operation, that also we could do. If I have to do that, I'll make some different things. I'll show you that in a moment. If the choice is not amongst 1 to 5, invalid choice enter, please enter the valid choice. Now, we have this particular data structure that is being created in the application. We have this place where we are accepting the data, and we have all these functions that have been created. We also have function to display the menu, print menu. So here we could call the function called as print menu. Print menu. And then we had to enter a choice that was based on the options that we have here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exit की जगह हमने कहा है stop, suppose. So these are 5 operations that we have. And this was just to print the menu, and this was to enter the choice. And we could check if the choice is amongst 1 to 5 over here itself. If it's amongst 1 to 5, then we could proceed further. Otherwise, we could generate an error. That could have also been done. So I could have written a function okay. So you're saying input, enter your choice from the above list. The list is over here. So that message also we could end up printing there itself. It's only about printing menu. And now we have to accept choice. I could rather say def accept menu choice. I could prompt the user to enter the menu choice. Print the input था. Choice is equal to so and so, we could say. But we could do the validation over here as well. If choice is not digit, you are going to say enter the input in valid format. Exit नहीं करेंगे सिर्फ. Here we force the user to enter the right choice. I'll say while true, I'm creating an infinite loop. I'm asking the user to enter the choice. So this will also come inside. Here we ask user to enter the choice. Amongst those 5 items, whatever is the choice, user enters some choice. And if it is not digit, we're going to generate an error, a warning. Second thing is what we'll check is valid choice key range we have. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'll say, suppose if I have some value, I could just check, is it in this range? So I could check over here. First, is it digit? If it is not digit, I'll print an error message and I'll say continue. And I'll also check else key. I could say continue. Continue. That's one part of validation. Second, I could check if choice in range 1 to 6, 1 to 5 चाहिए ना, 6 is like ignored. Like in this case, if I say is 4 in range, false कह रहा है, तो 4 चाहिए तो वहाँ 5 यानी 3 तक ही हम चेक कर गए. 0 1 2 3 था. 3 in range, yes. और आपने 1 to 4 भी कहा तो 3 in range 2 और 4 in range कहा तो false. तो if choice is in this range 1 to 5, अगर इस range में है, if not in range, so I could just print the message once again. Print message and continue. Okay, there is no need for me to write continue over here, although if it is not digit, we print the message continue. If it is not in the range, we print the message and we continue. And if everything is okay, तो यहाँ पर we will also say continue. Continue. Otherwise, I'll say break. That means if these two conditions are not true, then I'm going to break. If I break, I'll return int of choice. Could I put it across in some different format? I enter the choice. I check whether it's digits. This will not work because I'll have to convert this beforehand. I'll have to say, I'll have to use the statement over here. Choice is equal to int of choice. So I can check for the range. And so if it's digits, I'm going to convert it into an integer. And if it's not in the range, I'm going to print the message. If everything is okay, if this is not satisfied, this is also not satisfied, I'm going to break. And I'm going to return choice. Choice is already been converted to integer. I'll return choice. So this is something that we could do for accepting the choice from the user. So once the choice from the user has been accepted, I'll print the menu first, and I'm going to say choice is equal to accept menu choice. So I'll say accept menu choice. So whatever choice you enter, and we are checking whether it's in the range or not. If it's 5, I'm going to say break, stop, and then break. If it's in the operation other than 5, so in the dictionary, I'm going to accept the first integer, the second integer, and perform the operation, display the result, and continue. So let's run this particular code. Here is a menu that has been displayed to us. I say I would like to perform operation of addition. First integer, I say 34. Num1 is not defined. It was num. If not, num1 dot digit. Line number 46. We made the change. Let's run the code. User enter choices 1. First number is 23. Second is 12. कहता है result of add is 35. आपको add नहीं चाहिए था, result of addition चाहिए था. What could you do? It's very simple. Yeah, you also want to print this plus this is so and so. That's also possible. So instead of just saying result of this, I could say, watch it. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to say num1 operation.choice.name की जगह I'm going to say doc num2 is equal to result is what I'm going to. And here for this function, instead of saying addition of two numbers, addition of these, I just change their name to this is plus, this is multiply, this is divide, this is raise to, the common notation that we use, not true to Python, but raise to, this is how we represent normally. So let's save it and run it and do it for addition once again. Here I am, I enter choices 5. It says that's all, the program stops. Let's run the code once again. I enter number as 1, that's addition. Enter the first integer is 10, second is 34. It says 10 plus 34 is equal to 44. Let's do again, second one. Second is multiplication. So 3 and 8. So it says 3 into 8 is equal to 24. Okay. And then I enter choice as 3. And 3 is for division. I enter number as 23. And divided by 4. It says 23 divided by 4 is 5.75. Let's see for power. Power, it enters 4. And 5 and 3. So it says 5 raised to 3 is 125. The only thing that we could do is before this menu, we could leave a line. And I could say stop as 5. So menu operations, we could just print a line before it, new line. And if you wanted to have a dash line, that could also be done, but at least a single new line is something that is must. And even after this, enter your choice from 1 to 5. After we accepted it, you could leave one line. Okay. हमने accept मैंने choice कर लिया धीरे से, accept integer, accept मैंने choice, let's say printed here, just a blank line. Let's see what will happen. Again, if I enter 1, okay, enter the first integer 34 6, says 34 6 is 40. It leaves a line, menu of operation or operations menu, and you could do whatever you would like to. I enter choice as 4. First is 3, second is 5. The 3 to the power raised to 5 is 243. And then I said 5, we come out. But the most interesting part, what Rahul has correctly done over here, is to use this concept that we learned yesterday. And that is this part. Your function can be stored in data structure as well. So if a function can be stored inside a data structure, he has the key and a value. So what he checks over here is something very important. Here, when I say operation of choice, that's a dictionary. Choice coil is 3. So operation of 3 will give function name called as divide. So this is indirect call to divide, wherein I'm passing num1 and num2. So here is making use of indirect call. Indirect call to the approved function. So you don't have to write that if else and other things that you all have written. ये जो आप लोगों ने लिखा था, he has eliminated that thing completely. ये जो आपका है ना, ये this has been function calls have been eliminated completely. All both of you had done this. This call has been totally eliminated just by having knowledge about such thing. If you have a menu, and you could make use of that menu. This style of writing the code is a functional way of writing the code. And what you both have done, it's an imperative way of writing the code. The old style, the C programmer would do this way, and a Python programmer would do it this way. Okay. And where you also introduce some additional methods inside it. This was another interesting aspect. I have the documentation comments. And when I have to display the result, I'm saying num1 operation.choice. That's a function name. .doc. So when I say .doc, I'll get this divide. Yeah, power. What is the function? Suppose if I have this power function dot dunder dot dunder, it'll tell me raised to. So that's precisely what I'm doing. I'm making use of that particular information, and then num2 is equal to result is what I'm doing. And that's how the code has now been completed. So that's far better than, I'm not saying what the other two as I have implemented that was wrong. This is just better than what the other two have done. I'll just share this file with you. File name is menu.py. So let me share this file with you, menu.py. I hope you have received this file. Have you all received the file?
Yes, sir.
Anybody has any query regarding it? Any questions?
सर
हाँ.
एक क्वेश्चन था, इम्प्लीमेंट करते टाइम मैंने फंक्शंस का लिस्ट बनाया
हाँ.
और उसको इंडेक्सिंग से मैं एक्सेस कर रहा था तो वो हो नहीं रहा था, वो उसके नीचे का कोड।
Okay. मैंने वही किया था. I'll just show you my implementation for the same function. I have created a list of functions. Operation is equal to accept data, multiply, add, divide, power, exit choice. एक लिस्ट बनाया. n1, n1, n2 बाय डिफॉल्ट मैंने 1 लिया है. ओके, यानी यूजर ने कुछ नहीं एंटर नहीं किया तो 1 तो रहेगा ही ऐसे. Then I say get menu choice. Okay, and then I'm saying choice in the range 2 to length of operations. Now length of operations ये थोड़ा और flexible है as to what Rahul has done. The designer doesn't know. I suppose you have these operations and I want to know whatever may be the options over here. You may add some options, you may delete some options from here. So when I say length of operation, तो ये 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 तो देगा मुझे. तो मुझे मालूम है मेनू का चॉइस 6 ही चाहिए, 6 तक ही चाहिए. But then why am I saying 2? Why not saying 1 से 6 तक? The reason for that is I'm going to keep choice 1 for accepting data. वो मैंने accept data के लिए रखा है. तो बाकी के लिए 2 to length of operation, यानी ये 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ऐसे मैं कर रहा हूँ. तो we take that 2 to length of the operations choice. So instead of 1 we are saying 2, because when I'm going to get menu choice में पहला वाला accept data है. तो मुझे choice कहाँ से चाहिए? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 तक चाहिए. So since I want the choice from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I do not want to include accept data, because probably I have accepted the data somewhere else. In get menu choice में मैंने accept किया है. I have accepted in get menu choice. So accept data if choice in the range of 1 to 7, break कह रहा हूँ, और break करके what I have done I need to see. Accept data में मैंने ये data accept किया है, I am returning the value. Bad idea. हमने जो किया था अभी वही ठीक है. But then coming back to your question, I can very well have a list. Say user enter choice as 3, 1, 2, 3, add choice enter करता है user, और user को addition का operation करना है. या मेनू चॉइस मेनू में add 3 पे क्या है तो addition है, user को addition का operation करना है. तो what do I do? I say operation of choice minus 1. Choice is 3, but अगर list की बात करें तो ये 0, 1 और 2 है. तो मैंने कहा operations of choice minus 1, 3 है तो 3 minus 1 is 2, और आगे n11 minus n2 यानी add of n1 minus n2, वो result आ गया, and I could just continue. So even if it's list and not a set, then also it's going to work. अगर आप imperative style से ये कोड लिखते हैं the way you have done it, तो ये कुछ ऐसा लिखा था आपने, get menu choice, choice 1 है तो accept data, choice 2 है तो ये other things. Okay, the only improvement that we could do is we could just take our अभी जो कोड लिखा है हमने उसमें से we'll take this function called as accept. Menu choice में accept data कहा गया. Accept integer is what we'll take. we could add this function accept integer and return number, and like what we had done over here. into position of first integer second integer कहते हुए डेटा एक्सेप्ट कर सकते हैं. So that's one. ये imperative style of coding हो गया. But instead now we are doing functional style of coding. Functional में क्या किया? We have created a list. Rahul had created a dictionary. So instead of dictionary we have a list. I have both the variables whose initial value is set to 1 while true है. मैंने choice लेंगे range in the range length of the operation. तो 1 2 3 4 5 6 है. तो 2 to 6 we will create because 1 is for is accept data for us. तो वो हमें नहीं चाहिए. तो accept तो नहीं चाहिए, हमें multiply divide यही चाहिए because accept तो हमने menu choice में ही किया था. तो यहाँ मैंने get menu choice function दिया है where I print the menu. तो get menu choice में क्या कर सकते हैं, ये उठा के बाहर रख सकते हैं और get menu choice that's also okay. It's displaying the menu and getting the choice. Both the things are done. You could do a bit of validation also for this particular function. अब आपका choice आ गया तो I'm saying choice in the range 1 तो पहले ही accept हो चुका है. because menu choice में ही हम लोग एक्सेप्ट कहाँ कर रहे हैं, एक मेनू चॉइस एक्सेप्ट कर लिया, सही है तो ब्रेक कर लिया, ब्रेक होके चॉइस रिटर्न कर लिया. चॉइस अगर यहाँ आ जाता है तो डेटा n1 n2 है, अगर चॉइस 1 है ओके अगर चॉइस 1 है तो हमने कहा एक्सेप्ट डेटा. एक्सेप्ट डेटा के लिए वही करना होगा दोबारा. I'll have to call this n1 and n2. These two statements I'll have to copy. अगर चॉइस 1 है तो if the choice is not 1, choice 6 है तो I'm going to call exit choice, but that was again not necessary. हाँ ना exit choice में आपको terminate करना है तो probably यहाँ वो issue आ सकता है. हमने कहा stop, तो stop में हमने एक function को call किया है. तो here also we could do the same thing. ये 1 2 3 4 5 6 है, choice 6 है. तो अगर choice 6 है तो exit choice function को हम लोग कॉल करेंगे. exit choice function क्या कर रहा है, तो finish with the operation मैसेज देके प्रोग्राम को स्टॉप कर रहा है. So it will stop, it should stop the program. So for that program to get stopped, we'll have to do something over here like what we have done over here. तो यहाँ हमने क्या किया था, स्टॉप करके ब्रेक किया था. Okay, so we'll have to do something for that particular function. तो चॉइस अगर बाकी सारी चॉइस है तो इसे कॉल करेंगे. टू लेंथ ऑफ द ऑपरेशन, तो एग्जिट चॉइस को कॉल नहीं करेंगे हम लोग बिकॉज 2 से लेके मतलब ये नहीं कॉल होगा, ये 2 से 0 1 2 ऐड से ले क्यू 2 1 लेना चाहिए. ओके बिकॉज मैं यहाँ चॉइस -1 कह रहा हूँ. ओके चॉइस -1 कह रहा हूँ. तो इंस्टेड व्हाट आई कुड डू इज 1 2, ये 1 है तो ये 2 है, नहीं ये 0 है तो ये 1 है. वेरी करेक्ट. तो ये देखिएगा ये 0 है ये 1 है. 1 2 3 4, फिफ्थ नहीं चाहिए हमें. तो लेंथ ऑफ द लिस्ट विल गिव यू 6. 6 - 1 इज 5, तो 2 to 5. 2 to 5 का मतलब है अगर 2 देता है तो यूजर 1 आएगा, ये 0 है और ये 1 है, फिर मल्टीप्लाई आएगा. तो एग्जिट चॉइस नहीं दे रहे हम लोग. एग्जिट चॉइस के लिए वैल्यू क्या आना चाहिए, 0 1 2 3 4 5 आना चाहिए. तो लेंथ ऑफ द लिस्ट 6 है, तो 2 to 6 कहेंगे तो 2 to 5 आएगा। 0 1 2 3 4 5 आएगा, तो 1 2 3 4 5 6। So this is the list that we have. 2 3 4 5 6 आहेत है, 6 में last choice will be 5, तो 5 है
सर वो लाइन 94 पे 5 होगा ना?
लाइन
94।
नहीं 6 रहेगा। 1 2 3 4 5 मेनू देखो ना, मेनू में 6 में एग्जिट है, दैट्स करेक्ट। तो अगर एग्जिट चॉइस आता है तो ये एग्जिट चॉइस कॉल करके ब्रेक करेंगे, विल कम आउट ऑफ दैट थिंग। So let's run this particular code. I'm using list just to answer what Ashish was saying. This also works. ये कहता है accept data, multiply data, addition, division, power, exit. तो मैंने पहले कहा accept data. First integer 23, second integer 4. तो result display करना रह गया कहीं तो। Choice in the range, ये accept तो हो गया, accept हो गया है। Then I want to multiply data, तो मैंने कहा 2. तो result is 92. मैंने कहा प्रेस इन की टू कंटिन्यू, मैंने कहा 3, तो कहता है रिजल्ट इज 27। जो लास्ट टाइम में किया था वो इंप्रूवमेंट इसमें ला सकते हैं हम लोग। इंप्रूवमेंट क्या ला सकते हैं? दिस इज मल्टीप्लाई, आई विल ऐड द डॉक्यूमेंटेशन कमेंट्स सेइंग ये मल्टीप्लाई है, दैट्स द डॉक्यूमेंटेशन कमेंट दैट विल ऐड। तो लाइकवाइज आई कुड ऐड डॉक्यूमेंटेशन कमेंट फॉर दिस एज वेल and put sign of plus, while this I put it as small case x, this I put it as divide, this I put it as raised to, that's it. And here, instead of just displaying the result, somewhere we have displayed the result. Here, instead of just displaying the result, we could do what we had done earlier. I could actually say I'll take this and that's the result. That's the function name that we have. Actually, I could take the function name only over here. Choice minus one. I could call it as function is equal to operation of so and so. So this would solve my problem now. I could say n1 here function dot doc n2 is equal to result is equal to function of n1 comma n2, and I could say over here result. Let's run this style of writing the program, the functional style of writing the program. While we had one place we had a list, other place we have earlier we had a dictionary, now we have a list over here. So I enter a choice, say I enter choice as 6, कहता है finish with the operations. I run the program, I enter choice as 2, कहता है 1 into 1 is 1, because by default value I have taken as 1, n1 and 2. Now if I say accept data, it is 10 and 3. So I enter choice 10, it कहता है incorrect value entered, please enter press any key to continue. Again the menu has been displayed, I enter 1, enter the first integer 10, second integer 3. Now if I say 2, that is multiply, कहता है 2 into 3 is 30. मैंने कहा नहीं भाई एडिशन करना है, 3 एंटर किया, 10 plus 3 is 13. डिवीजन करना मैंने 4 एंटर किया, 10 divided by 3 is so and so. मैंने फिर 4 की जगह 5 एंटर कर लिया, कहता है 10 raised to 3 is 10,000. और मैंने 6 एंटर कर लिया, 6 एंटर कर लिया, stop. So you could do it in different ways. Whatever data structure you would like to use, you could use a list, you could use a dictionary as well. Function object need, so I'll also call this as function object need 1. Two versions of the same program. Okay, what you had written was imperative style of writing the program, and what is written over here is an functional style of writing the program, where you have got rid of this entire menu. Yeah, if else construct we have got rid of. Instead, we are handling it in a different way. There's a different way which you are handling. And what we're doing is like choice is one, we are accepting data. So that also could have been done. You could accept data for both the variables n1 and n2. Probably this is what we have done over here. If choice, before the enter choice, we are always accepting the data. So that's what we have done. Here we are always accepting data. In the implementation that I have done, I'm accepting the data only once. Later, we could change the data when you want it. But the style of writing the program has totally changed. Any questions if you have, please ask. I will share both these files with you. Have you understood this everybody? Any questions? अच्छा आपका डाउट क्लियर हुआ क्या?
Yes.
Yes, Shantanu, Prithviraj, Harsh.
Yes, sir.
Shantanu.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Actually, I was planning to start with some very advanced topic today, but we spent time discussing the implementation for that code. That's also very important. So let's today take up a simpler part of our discussion that I was planning to take. So we'll just take a 2 minutes tea break, water break, whatever you would like to, and we'll continue. 5 minutes, say 5 minutes. It's 21:11, 21:16 we meet. Just 5 minutes break. So let's start off with the second part of our discussion. What I had actually planned to start off today was a concept of nested functions. It's a very advanced concept, but today I'll just take a brief about it. Because these nested functions will lead us to use or create something called as closures in Python. But before we go with those advanced concept of closure, let's explore what is a nested function. As the name suggests, we are actually getting a hint. Nested means one thing inside another. If I have nested if, I can define a function within a function. So that becomes a nested function, a function within a function. That's a nested function. Is it supported in language like C and other languages that you may have learned? Is it supported? Ashish, Prithviraj, you have done C. Can we define a function within a function?
No, sir.
Yes or no?
No.
No.
Prithviraj, no. Okay, there is a version of C called a GNU-C, which is just ahead of standards that allows you to define nested functions. So in case anytime you come across a requirement where you want to have a nested function in C, you can compile your code with the GNU compiler. If you do that, you are allowed to do that. Just it's not a part of standard C though. This GNU is always one step ahead of standards. And all these years I have been watching, several years, a feature that becomes popular in GNU C that is later adopted by standards. So who knows if that becomes popular, yeah, even the C standards may adopt nested functions. But as of now, it's not a part of standard C. GNU C, that means you just have to take a different compiler that allows you to have a nested function. There are a lot of organizations that use GNU C. Yeah? It has some features which are beyond the standards, more than the standards. Whatever the standard supply that is there, plus they will provide you something more. The nested function is one such feature which GNU C supplies, not the standard C. But in Python, standard Python provides you nested function. We also call it local function. Local function, also called as nested functions, are functions that are defined inside another function. Simple, nested, one thing inside another. These functions are visible only to the function where they have been defined. So inside of function A, if I define function B, the only function A knows about existence of B. It's local. Its visibility is low, like a local variable. It's visible only within the function in which it has been defined, not outside. They're especially useful for creating small helper functions that you have to use, that you have no use elsewhere. Means you have defined a function, and there is another function. There is a piece of code that only that function requires, and no other function requires it. Then, if you create too many functions outside, so it is unnecessary. You have to keep a track. Are ये function क्या कर रहा है? If there is a function X which is used only by function Y, and nowhere else you need that particular function, you could just keep one function inside Y itself. So I personally call it as a very unique way of packaging the function. So don't keep the function at the topmost level like what we have been keeping at the topmost level. Keep it inside a function. If that outer function is the only one that requires that inner function, so you could keep it inside that particular function. It's a way of packaging. We call it as small helper functions. Functions can be defined within the scope of another function. If this type of function definition is used, the inner function is only in the scope inside the outer function. So it is most useful when the inner function is being returned, moving it in the outer scope, or when being passed to another function. This is part is we are not discussing right now. We're just discussing the nested function. So if I have a temperature as a function, inside which I have another function called as Celsius to Fahrenheit. So depending on if temperature was to be converted, so if you pass T, I could convert the Celsius to Fahrenheit and get the result in the appropriate format. So let's have a look at such a nested function that I have defined. Here I have a function called as temperature. This function temperature takes a floating point data, and that's nothing but the temperature in degrees Celsius that are a single parameter. Takes a temperature in degrees Celsius as a single parameter, or a single parameter. So it takes a temperature in degrees Celsius as a single parameter. So degrees Celsius में आप temperature pass करने वाले. And what it returns a string? It returns a temperature in Fahrenheit. So you're gonna let us return not string. Let's return a float only. Let's return float and call it over here as float. And returns a temperature in Fahrenheit. So what we'll do is we'll not take a string, rather we'll return the temperature in Fahrenheit. So we have a function called as temperature that takes temperature in degrees Celsius and returns it in Fahrenheit. So this conversion ke liye we have to perform some operation, correct? So I have written some helper function called as Celsius to Fahrenheit, and I call this function Celsius to Fahrenheit. So you pass some temperature, say you pass 100. So this 100 I'm going to pass over here. That will receive over here. It will do the conversion from degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit, and that will now be returned assigned to this variable Fahrenheit, and that Fahrenheit I'll return. So if I'm asking user to enter the temperature in degrees Celsius, I give a call to this function called as temperature. So I pass the temperature in degrees Celsius. So that's assigned over here. Okay. And we do the conversion by calling this function that will do the conversion, give the temperature in Fahrenheit, and temperature in Fahrenheit will be assigned to the result, which will print. I could write, I could say temperature Fahrenheit. Temperature Fahrenheit, instead of result, I say temperature Fahrenheit. So when I pass this particular temperature, degree Celsius temperature to this function called as temperature, it internally calls function Celsius to Fahrenheit, which converts the degree temperature into Fahrenheit, and then I'm using it for further operation, whatever operation I have to do. And I get the result. If I run this particular code, I will ask to enter in temperature in degrees Celsius. I enter temperature in degrees Celsius as 77. It says 170. 170 is in Fahrenheit now. We got the result. I could print a message over here saying, if I know what was the purpose of that. So I could say, let's save it and run. I enter the temperature once again as 77. It says temperature 77 in Fahrenheit is. Oh, I could say degree Celsius also here and degree Fahrenheit also here. So here I could just Celsius, and I want to put the degree symbol. So let's have a look at that degree dot. For that, I'll say character map. In character map, I'll search for degree. Degree Fahrenheit. I could run this code and user enters temperature as 66. Get the temperature in 66.0 Celsius is in Fahrenheit is 158.8. Like we put that symbol saying degree Fahrenheit, whatever it is. So we could put those symbols as well if you want. Means temperature so and so degree Celsius is degree Fahrenheit. You could do that. But then this particular existence of this function is not known outside this particular function. So only the temperature function is aware about existence of a function called as Celsius to Fahrenheit. It's not available outside. Watch it. If I run this particular code, I could very well call this function temperature and pass some temperature to it. I could pass suppose 88. I'll get some result. But if I make an attempt to access this function outside the function temperature directly, and I'm trying to pass 55, it will generate an error saying that Celsius to Fahrenheit is not defined, because this particular function is local to this function. Only this outer function is aware about this inner function. So this local function's existence is known only to function temperature. The rest of the world does not know about that particular function. The rest of the world does not know about the function. It's local to that particular function. So it's called as local functions. Have you understood this basic concept about local functions? Before I go to another example. Yes. Okay. Actually, that's all that is there about that particular function. Another important aspect that you should actually understand while we are using this particular function is, which we should understand. Just compare this local function with another local function. Watch it. Here in this case, I have this function temperature which receives the degree Celsius. But when I'm calling this function, I pass the degree Celsius. Then I receive the degree Celsius over here. And I'm using it for the calculation of conversion of degree Celsius to Fahrenheit. But if I don't pass, then will this function be in position to access it? That's another piece of information that you should understand. So the local function has a permission to access the variables of its surrounding environment. So this particular function is enclosed inside function temperature. So this inner function or the local function has a permission to access the variables of the surrounding function. Just to show that I have written the same function in a different way. I'm saying temperature degree Celsius is a float. I'm going to return a string, what it is. I have this helper function called as def Celsius to Fahrenheit. But note, we are not passing anything to that function. And it directly says 9 into degree Celsius divided by 5 plus 20 plus 32. That means this inner function has a permission to access the variable of the surrounding environment. Variable of the surrounding environment is read only in the nested function. If I try and make changes to that particular variable over here, that would generate an error. So you can access the variable of the surrounding environment, but you cannot change the variable of the surrounding environment. You have permission to access the variable of the surrounding environment. So I directly give a call. I'm not passing the data. Watch it. Unlike what we had done earlier. Earlier, we are passing the degree Celsius that the outer function has accepted. Now, I'm not passing anything over here. I directly come over here and I'm directly saying degree Celsius. That's a variable of the surrounding environment. So the nested function can access the variable of the surrounding or enclosing scope. However, at least in Python, they are read only. That means as far as this function goes, this variable which is being accessed inside this function is read only. You can read the value of the surrounding environment. Watch it. I have message called as transmit to space and the message isn't transmitted. But to transmit my message to the space, I need a data transmitter. So whenever somebody says transmit this particular message to the space, actually I'm going to call data transmitter. But how does the data transmitter function know which message has to be transmitted? This is internal implementation. I'm not going to tell the world how is my message being transmitted to space. I'm using a data transmitter, but since it is a nested function, it knows the variable of the surrounding environment, so it could directly access the variable of the surrounding environment. But you may say, sir, यहाँ तो आप change कर रहे हो. Remember, in Python strings are immutable. If I call a method, it will return you a new string. तो वो upper case में वो string return करेगा and it will work for you. So let's run this. I first run this code, this particular code first. Let's see what happens. Temperature in degree Celsius. I enter 56. कहता है it's 132.8 degree Fahrenheit is what it says. And degree आपको print ही करना था तो आप ये degree की जगह कुछ जैसे oh not this. We could take the symbol that we just now copied. It's 138 degree Fahrenheit. It will say degree Fahrenheit is what it will say. Let's run the code once again. I pass value as 78. It says it's 172.4 degree Fahrenheit. Okay. So we could do that. And suppose I give a call to this very function now, transmit to space. I pass the test message to the space. So I'm passing it says test message transmitted to space. Oh, I had entered test message in capitalized format. Ye to sara uppercase mein aa gaya. How did it happen? The transmitter, there is a change. You pass this message over here. There's a function called as data transmitter, which is being called from within this function. This data transmitter is converting this particular function to the message to uppercase and then transmitting it to the space. So the point that I'm trying to put across is the inner function or the nested function has a permission to access the variable of the surrounding environment. What it cannot do is it cannot change the value of the variable of the surrounding environment. That is what it is restricted from doing. Have you understood this particular concept, nested function, everybody? Anybody has any question? Local functions is what I'm sharing with you. Okay. Now that all of you understood this, let's jump on for the next part. There's a concept called as closure that we have. Now that has to do with these nested functions. So what is this concept of closure? That has to do something with this concept of nested functions. Let's explore what is a closure. And some people call it closure, some of them call it as factory functions. And there are some difference of opinion as to what should be the name of this kind of functions. I'll not get into those. I'll use both the names. Some people object it being called as closure. Mathematicians normally. So they say, don't call it closure, call it as something else. And what is the something else that they expect we to call it as factory function? So some mathematicians, not the programmers, mathematicians, object use the word closure. अगर आपका मैथ्स अच्छा है तो याद करो मैथ्स में क्लोजर क्या है. I'm not so good at maths. I don't know why they object using the word closure. But then a factory function. So what is a factory function or what's a closure? A nested function has access to the environment in which it was defined. We just saw that. Our function data transmitter was having a permission to access the variable of the surrounding environment, send message to space. Our variable convert to Fahrenheit had a permission to access the variable of the surrounding environment degree, which was defined the surrounding environment called as temperature. So that's a known fact. Therefore, it's possible to return an inner function that remembers the state of the outer function even after outer function has completed execution. Please note down this line, very important. So it's possible to return an inner function. So we are for the first time going to write a function which will return a function. And the inner function that we are going to return to the outer scope remembers the state of the outer function even after the outer function is executed. That means the inner function will now have copies of the variables of the outer function and it will remember what were that outer function was when you called it. This model is also referred to as closure. I have a function which returns a function. I have a function which returns a function, and that inner function also remember the state of the variables of the outer function. Okay, that's closure. A closure is a function that's defined inside another function, so it's a nested function. But it is then passed outside that function where it can be used by other code. That means inside function A, I have defined function B, but this B which is defined inside function A is passed outside the function A. A closure occurs when a function has access to the local variables from the enclosing scope that has finished its execution. That means the outer function A is completed and the inner function B remembers what was the state of the outer function A when it was called. So let's have a look at a simple format of closure. Watch it. This is very important example to clarify this basic concept of closure or factory. I have a function called as multiply by. Multiply by. This function returns a function that multiplies the values by a given factor. So if I say multiply by 10, so it's going to multiply by 10. I have another function called as multiply. This is multiply by. We have another local function called as multiply, which receives a value. And this value is multiplied by the factor with which you have passed. That means when I call this multiply by, I am going to pass the factor. And what is the value that we pass to this multiply? I'm going to multiply it by this factor. Okay. And note kijega, I'm returning that function called as multiply. I'll just keep this thing aside. Otherwise, it will only confuse you. So I'm returning the function multiply. That means inner function I'm returning outside the scope of the outer function. That makes it a closure. So if somebody asks you what's a closure, we should have a function which is defined inside another function. The inner function or the nested function should be accessing the variable of the surrounding environment. So you have factor A. So that's a variable of the surrounding environment that is being accessed inside the nested function. And third, that outer function should return the inner function. So if the three properties are satisfied, it becomes a closure. Now, if I run this particular code and keep it ready in the memory, it's declared and kept in the memory. But if I make an attempt to call this multiply function directly, that would generate an error. It'll say multiply. If I say multiply 4, it is saying 4. Okay. Let's first clear this. It's multiply something else that is getting run. Here we go. This function is ready in the memory. And I'm going to call multiply function, multiply 4. Let's see what happens. It generates an error. That's why there's something else happening. Probably the last code of multiply was there in the memory. So it says name multiply is not defined. Although you have defined it, it is a nested function. The existence of this nested function is known only to its surrounding environment. It is not only to its outer function. Other people do not know about this function. So I comment it out. Now I give a call to multiply by. Listen, I'm giving a call to multiply by. I pass value 2. Value 2 will be received over here. Value 2 will be received over here. And then note, I'm not calling this function multiply anywhere. Note, I'm not calling this function. I'm just returning this function multiply. The variable of the outer function becomes a read-only variable in the inner function. So now this version of multiply, which I'm returning from here, has the value of factor as 2. Because you pass 2 over here, you have passed 2 over here, so that 2 will get substituted over here. So what is the value that will pass to multiply? 2 into 2 it will do. It will multiply it by 2. Okay. And why is that? Because you are returning this multiply. So if I say times 2 is going to multiply by 2, what you're going to go to get is the multiply function wherein the factor of the value is 2. Because the inner function, remember the state of the outer function when it was called. So when the outer function was called, the value of the outer function's parameter is 2. So this version will be remembered. It will remember what is the value. Watch it. If I create this function and if I print what is times 2, it will give me the inner function. Okay, it is a function multiply by के अंदर का एक local function called as multiply. It's a local function called as multiply. That means times 2 is now referring to the inner function. Why? Because you are returning a function. So this function that you have returned is got assigned to times 2. So if I say time2.name, it will give the name of the inner function. Okay. Multiply. Multiply तो ये वाला inner function है. वही तो return क्या है? What is the name we saw? If I see what's the doc, it says multiply the given value by the factor that is already provided. So the factor that is already provided is 2 now. And if I say times 2.doc, okay, then multiply the given value by the factor already provided. Okay, times 2.doc. I say ID of times 2. Okay, तो ये है I times 2 का ID. And now I give a call to times 2 of 10. Times 2 is referring to this function called as multiply. And what's the proof? When I'm printing times 2, it's saying it's a function called as multiply, which is local to this function called as multiply by. So if I now say times 2 of 10, so it's as good as calling function multiply. Because when I say times 2 dot name, it's the multiply function that we are referring to. The multiply function will be called at this particular line. 10 will be passed to this multiply function. This is 10, value is 10, and value into factor. When I say, oh, it remembers the value of the surrounding environment. So when this function was returned, you got it over here, the value of the surrounding variable was 2. So whatever value now you pass to this times 2, it will multiply it by 2. Watch it. I'll print this result, 2 lines. 20 आ गया result. Likewise, I say times 3, multiply by 3. I say multiply by 3. So now that copy of function called as multiply that has now been returned and assigned to times 3 remembers the state of the surrounding environment where the value of factor is 3 and not 2 now. Okay, but if I see the names on the doc, it's the function called as multiply. Although I'm saying times 3, it's the function called as multiply. If I see its ID, it should be different than the previous function's ID. So ये times 2 का ID है और ये times 2 का ID है और ये times 3 का ID है. Both IDs are different. That means these are two different copies of the same function multiply. One remembers the value of factor to be 2. Other remembers the value of factor to be 3. Now if I say result is equal to 3 times 3 of 10, we will multiply 3 by 10, 10 by 3, and it will give the result, so 30. Likewise, I could say times 2 of 5, times 2 of 3 of 5, so times 2 of 5 karoge, so in that case, it will be multiplied by 2, or times 3 karoge, it will multiply by 5, so 10 and 15. If I say my multi is equal to multiply by, and if I delete multiply by, outer function I'm deleting, but I still can work with times 2 and times 3. They're still there. Because we saw yesterday, the name of the function is just like a reference referring to the function. And I can make it assigned to another reference as well. So if I now say times 5, my multi of 5, in that case, the value of this particular factor will be 5. And if I say times 5 of 10, it gives answer is 15. 10 into 5 is 15. So that's a closure that we have created. Have a look at this particular closure and let me know if you have any doubt. Function closure is what we have seen. Remember the properties of a closure. What can be called as a closure? You should have a function within a function. That's the first thing. Second, the inner function should access the variable of the outer function. That's second thing. And the outer function should return the inner function. That's the third thing. Therefore, any function to be called as a closure, it should have 3 things. First, within that function, there should be inner function, nested function. Second, the inner function should be accessing the variable of the surrounding function. And third, the outer function should be returning the inner function. If these 3 parameters are met, then the outer function will call it as a closure. I have just shared the file with you. Just open the file. And if you have any questions, please ask. Take that program. Any line, any questions, if you have, please ask.
सर एक मिनट कोड खोलो मुझे. सर जहाँ पे हाँ लाइन
Line
नंबर 43 जहाँ पे डिलीट किया है.
The function never gets deleted. It's a reference, na? Function name are just like a reference, referring to the function object somewhere in the memory. So that reference is deleted. So what? Outer function reference is deleted. But my multi is still pointing to another same function multiply by.
Okay.
Okay. I could delete this also, no worries. The times 2 and time 1 are references to the inner function. Even if the outer function is destroyed, the reference to the inner function is available because when you called it, you are assigned to times 2. So inner function का reference है आपके पास. So outer function can be destroyed and inner functions can still be present in the memory. That's also very much possible. Any other question? Anybody?
Sir, what does that doc show? Line
What does
number doc
line
show.
number?
33.
Line number 33. Oh, a doc. Times 3 dot doc will give you this doc. Inner function. That's a nice thing that you asked. So if I run this times 3, I have deleted the function. Let's redefine this function. I say times 3 is equal to multiply by 3. I print times 3 और times 3 वगैरह कुछ नहीं है. It's inner function called as multiply. ये देखो multiply which is present inside this function. If I say इसका नाम क्या है, I'll get the inner function name. मैंने कहा उसका doc क्या है, तो inner function का ही नाम doc है, nested function का ही नाम आएगा. देखो multiply the given value with the factor already provided. Yeah, this is the doc that we are getting. Because times 3 is now receiving the function returned by this. The outer function is returning the inner function. So times 3 is an alias, an additional name given to the outer function, inner function. Because outer function multiply by returns inner function called as multiply. So times 3 is now referring to function called as multiply and not multiply by. तो ये डॉग देखोगे तो ये इनर वाले फंक्शन का ही डॉग दिखाई दे रहा है, इस वाले फंक्शन का डॉग, नॉट द आउटर फंक्शन डॉग. और फिर जब रन करोगे तो इट विल मल्टीप्लाइड बाय 10 विल मल्टीप्लाई विद 3 एंड योर आंसर इज 30. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
So that was a very brief introduction to this concept of closure. So you could always keep in mind what is a closure. Okay, closure is a function or factory function. It's a function which has been when a function becomes a closure, when there is a function which has been defined inside another function, the inner function accesses the variable of the outer function, and the outer function returns the inner function. That makes it a closure. Have you all understood? Quick feedback, closure. Although I took a very simple example, but then that is where actually we begin with. Okay. I'm not going to trouble you much because you already learned concept of local, global, other things. In the tomorrow session, I'm going to teach you something which is not available in other languages, non-local. And non-local is not global. So what is non-local? So tomorrow when we meet, we'll explore a concept called as non-local, which has to be used while you are designing these closures. So I'll talk a bit more about closures tomorrow, explore and make you understand what is non-closure. Before that, you can go through these examples that we have taken today. And then we'll touch on the last part of our discussion, that is decorators. Okay, so that will finish our discussion with this concept of functions. So with that note, we'll stop over here today. See you tomorrow at the same time. Take care. Love you all. Bye-bye.